I am ready. Ready to go live? All right, good morning. Actually, good afternoon. So thanks for sticking around with me. I appreciate it. Today, I'm excited about the discussion. I know I covered quite a bit in that hour and 20 minutes. I guess we always cover quite a bit. But now is the time where I get to hear some of your comments, questions, and believe me, some of these don't necessarily have to agree with what I came up with. I don't know why anyone would disagree, but no, actually, I want people to come forward and make suggestions maybe that don't necessarily, you don't have to come to the same conclusions I do. However, what I really want us to focus on is just what we covered in the class, in that this is the period of time. We're covering the period of time following right after Horeb, right after the giving of the law, Matan Torah, as we call it, and looking at those different accounts in the sheet. I hope by now that all of you have the sheet. I posted that link several times, and let me see, I might still have it on. Look at that. Okay, I'm going to post it in the comments here, and I'll post it once again on the YouTube side as well. I'm trying to monitor that too, and that way you have access to the sheet that we worked through. One thing that I wanted to bring up, last night I noticed there was a comment on Horeb on the Discord server, and someone remarked, I think it was Mary Ann remarked, it's sort of sad that the people said, we don't want to hear God anymore. We would rather, Moses, that you go, you talk to God, and then you bring us back that message, whatever it is that God wants us to know, and we'll listen to you. And I used to be of the same camp. I used to think, how tragic, because, that put us in a whole nother way of communication. But one thing I wanted to point out, at least according to Deuteronomy 5:28 and Deuteronomy 18:17, it's on page 2 of the chart about midway down. And the Lord heard your words when you spoke to me. Now, this is referenced. The previous verse is where the people say, we don't want to hear God anymore. You go near, you listen to God, and then you bring us, you speak, and we'll listen to whatever you say. Deuteronomy 5:28 and 18:17, he says, the Lord heard your words when you spoke to me, and the Lord said to me, I've heard the words of this people which they've spoken to you. They are right in all that they have spoken. And what this sets us up for is, and this is one way to put it, it sets us up for the office of the prophet. It really opens up what was to become prophecy, because particularly in Deuteronomy 18, and we're going to get into this conversation hopefully today in the dialogue, this really sets us up for what became prophecy. In other words, if the people had simply said, we want to hear directly from God forever, this is the greatest thing. He comes to the mountain, he speaks audibly, we and our children and our parents all heard it together. If they had liked that or continued to want that, then you wouldn't have had the prophets. So that's what we're going to focus on today, hopefully. But I want to open it up this morning. If anyone wants to join me on the stage, if you have any questions, comments on the prophecy piece or on the happenings after Horeb, I would welcome that. And some of you had different ideas and comments during the class. I tried to follow along very closely, so I'm interested in that. So if you want to come up here and speak, I'm watching for hands to raise. Otherwise, I'll take a couple of sips of coffee and I'll just talk for another hour. I mean, let's see who might be ready to jump on stage. All right, let me make sure I have my. I see Ross Bearden on YouTube. Hello, Ross. I like that name, Ross. That is a nice name, Mr. Bearden. We missed you because a couple of weeks ago I was talking about, I guess it was last week, we talked about Jethro. And I know that you put a lot of time into a major study on Jethro. So you might be able to share that with us here. If you're on the Discord in particular, I would love for you to do that. Okay, Jodelle post, anyone interested? She posted an excerpt on the development of prophecy. Jodelle posted it in the comments here. And Jodelle's doing a really great job. Both Jodelle and Dr. Tabor as well are posting comments and different things that they're working on, things they're publishing in the Horeb server. All right, I have everyone get ready, put your hands together. I'm going to bring up on stage with me Elisheva, Betty Tabor Given. She is an author. Her book is battling it out right now for the #1 new release in both Torah and Talmud. It's called Hidden Sparks Beneath the Surface, an inspirational journey through the biblical festivals, the times and seasons of the Hebrew Bible. Welcome, Betty. Hopefully I've got you on stage and you can unmute. How does it feel to be an Amazon best-selling author, my friend?
Oh my goodness, Ross. Now you've embarrassed me again.
I know you like all this attention. That's why I did it. I know you. No, I know you don't.
Actually, I have my head down and I'm embarrassed, but thank you. Thank you anyway. The book was a labor of love dedicated to my husband, something that's been in my mind for a long time. I wanted to say Shabbat Shalom and happy Rosh Chodesh, the 12th month of Adar on the Jewish calendar. Actually, it's Adar Aleph, Adar 1. But my question has to do with the sacrificing in the wilderness. I know that you quoted a couple of quotes from Amos, also Jeremiah and Ezekiel, that did I ask for sacrifices, etc. What about, can you just talk a little bit about the plea that Moshe made to Pharaoh when he said, let us go 3 days in the wilderness to sacrifice?
Mm-hmm.
I don't, maybe you mentioned that before, but how does that coordinate with this?
Well, you're going to find, and we find, and I know that my view is not the only view on this subject, as you're pointing out. There's certainly text. There are several texts. There are 3 texts, in fact, where Moses talks to Pharaoh about this 3-day period into the wilderness, and not all of those say sacrifice. All right. So again, I know that there are plenty of texts. Anyone who's ever picked up the Hebrew Bible knows that there are plenty of texts which talk about sacrifices. But what we find in the Pentateuch and throughout the Bible is we find an incredible tension, a tension that is so strong that most people who objectively read the text find it difficult to bring both of these arguments and say, yes, they're both right. I'm reminded of the scene where Rev Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof is standing and the gentlemen are talking and it's Shabbat and they're getting ready and they're getting milk and various things, and an argument ensues, and Rev Tevye says, you're right, to one of the guys arguing, and someone else is bringing up another point. He says, and you're right too. And there's this idea that, both, one guy says both can't be right. So what happens in the biblical text is we do find this tension. I have a class, a full class, where I get into both of these views and really flesh out what I think about this. Um, it is the opinion of many scholars, and I would put myself in this same group of Bible readers, Bible students, Bible, researchers. I do believe that at a certain stage in Israel's history, sacrificial system was in full swing. Um, but I would say that in a system as described in the Pentateuch is anachronistic, meaning, this is my view, meaning that those texts which describe this full system of you're going to sacrifice this and this many and this, I think that's real late. Again, I know that there are people who hold different views, but yes, there is. I think it's one of the three, if I'm not mistaken. Let us go 3 days into the wilderness that we may sacrifice, but not all of them say that. Now, I know that is the one thing. I think most people think, well, Ross is just off his rocker because he clearly hasn't read the Bible if he doesn't believe sacrificial system existed in the time of Moses. Let me make one more point on this, and then I'll take a breath and let you fire back at me, Betty, or anyone, because this
I'm
is
not going to fire back.
because honestly, this isn't really the class that I taught today, but I knew when I listened to it with you all today, I said, oh, here we go. I brought it up again, so it's going to be out there, and I know that this is going to take most of the conversation probably. But what we see is there. Let me give you a couple more verses. So, for instance, um, one of the things that really strikes me is Hosea. In Hosea, you remember the passage in. Let's go to Micah. Let me go to Micah. Let me do Micah, chapter 6,
Mm.
and I just want to pick up there and make a couple of points about the sacrificial system. In fact, I don't know if I want to use this translation or another one. Let me see. Micah chapter 6, and Betty, I know you know these verses.
6:8.
But
Is that where you're going?
here's an example of the tension that I'm talking about. With what, Micah 6:6, with what shall I come
Mm.
before the Lord
Right.
and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams and 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? He's told you, oh man, what is good and what does Jehovah require of you?
Mm.
But to do justice, to love loving kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. It has been, ladies and gentlemen, 2,000 years. 2,000 years. And we just, there's no temple. There are no sacrifices. Now, at least the Christians have a response to that. What Christians would tell me is, well, that's because all of that pointed to Jesus, and once he died, there is no more need
Mm.
for it. And a lot of people
Mm.
say that the tension is because the people weren't doing it right. In other words, they approached the sacrificial system in a way that was that they didn't have their heart right. And so then when they killed the sacred cows, when they slaughtered whatever it was they were killing, if their heart would have been right, then God would have just loved it. But look, if I look at Hosea 6:6, for I desire chesed velozevak, and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God, rather than burnt offerings. I think it's pretty clear, at least in my. You can't say, I desire sacrifice and I don't. I mean, I desire steadfast love and I don't desire sacrifice. once you say you don't desire sacrifice, I think it's hard to then come back and say, I really do desire sacrifice. Is that, I mean, I
I
know, I know all the other arguments. I mean, people say, my God, Ross, you haven't read Ezekiel chapter 40 through 48? I mean, yeah, I know those passages. So, um, anyway, it's my view that that's late. I mean, it's like many other things. It's like the death of Moses. That wasn't written by Moses or about his time. It's written later. Exodus chapter 16 describes the manna existed for 40 years, and the people aren't even at Sinai in Exodus 16. So, so there are things written after the time of Moses, and I believe that many of those things are wrapped in the sacrificial cult. That's my view. So there you go.
I appreciate that, and would like to just say a big amen or
Yeah.
amen. Um, that's my view as well. I brought it up because I think it's important to understand the views. But what about, I mean, and anyone who knows me knows that I like to ask questions. I mean, I'm a question box. I have been all my life. Um, what about if we go back even further to the book of Bereshit,
Hmm.
when the two brothers with Cain and Abel,
Yeah.
and what sacrifice did Abel offer, and which one did Cain offer, and which one was pleasing according to the text?
Look,
I
I
mean that
believe me, what we're dealing with, Betty, we're dealing with a priestly text. We're dealing with a text
I
like
right,
Jeremiah said. Well, I mean, we can go through and bring up all these examples. For instance, Jeremiah said very clearly in Jeremiah 8:8, who are we to say that we are wise and the Torah of the Lord is with us when the lying pen of the scribes has made it a lie? Now, that's right after he says in
right.
Jeremiah 7 that God never commanded sacrifice and offering. What we're dealing with is clearly there is a text that we all now have and read and use, which is filled with tension. It advocates a king in Deuteronomy 17:14 through 21. It says, when you go into the
Right.
land, you're going to request a king like the nations. Well, that should be a flag to everybody, but it's not. And in 1 Samuel chapter 8, when the people say, hey, we want a king like the nations, perfect opportunity for Samuel to say, man, I knew this was going to happen because it's in my Bible in Deuteronomy 17:14 through 20, but I just didn't hope that it was in my days, but now, no, he doesn't know anything about it. He didn't know anything about it. But
Mm.
but much of the biblical record deals with the monarchy, and anyone who reads the monarchy will find that it was and is, as Jehovah called it in 1 Samuel 8:12 and 15, a rejection of his rule. And yet, much of the Bible deals with the king. So if we look at, like, people say, well, I'm interested in biblical Israel. Yes, okay. Well, biblical Israel is the good, the bad, and the ugly. Biblical Israel presents the religion as God presented it to his people, but we also, I think, have a document before us which is it's been heavily edited. We see a mixture of ancient and later views. So if we look at Cain and Abel, what when the scholars began, and not just in the 19th century, but as early as the 16th, 17th century, people began to question these tensions. They began to
Mhm.
look at why is it that one text seems to advocate sacrifice and other texts say God never wanted it. I mean, if we read, by the way, I saw Dave Tyler's hand up. I'm not forgetting you, brother. I'll bring you up in a minute. But if we look at Isaiah 66, for instance, in Isaiah 66, in fact, I'm going to read that, Isaiah 66, 1 through
And by
4.
the way, Isaiah 66 is the Haftorah for today because
Ye-
it's the new moon.
That's right. That's right. Well, there's a good reason that it shows up today.
And it is my, may I say, it's my Hebrew birthday.
That's right. There you
I
go.
had my other birthday, and I was born on a Shabbat and on Rosh Chodesh. So today's the day like it was when I was born.
Well, there
So
you
go
go.
ahead.
Well, here's your reading. Isaiah 66, verse 1. Thus says Jehovah, heaven is my throne, the earth is my footstool. What is the house that you would build for me, and what is my resting place? All these things my hand has made, and so all these things are mine, says Jehovah. But this is the one to whom I will look, to the humble and contrite in spirit, who trembles at my word. Whoever slaughters an ox is like one who kills a human being. Whoever sacrifices a lamb like one who breaks a dog's neck. Whoever presents a grain offering like one who offers swine's blood. Whoever makes a memorial offering of frankincense like one who blesses an idol. These have chosen their own ways, and in their abominations they take delight. Now, here's what people do with that. They either read it and understand what it says because they understand that it means what it says, or they say, but that can't be what it's saying. You go, well, why is that?
Mm.
Because we have all these texts about sacrifices. And what is so interesting is that, and this is why I love the Bible and have made it the passion of my days, is because it contains all of these views. It contains the views that even are presenting us with the tension. I mean, we have so many texts that we can go to. I get this all, believe me, I get all the time. Did you not read the opening chapter of Genesis? Do you not know that God desires the blood that Abel brought? Did you not know that Leviticus is
Mm.
filled with sacrifices? Did you not know, Ross, that Deuteronomy chapter 12 and 17 and Ezekiel 40 through 48? I get all that. But I also see that there are a multitude of passages which say just the opposite. And here's the big one. History has obliged. Meaning, if we needed a temple, a building made with hands, to approach the living God, we would have one. If we needed the slaughter of bulls and oxen, David says in Psalm 40, if you needed these things, I'd give them to you. But if we needed it, we would have it, and we don't. Again, Christians say all of that pointed to Jesus. Jesus died, and now he was the sacrifice to which everything pointed. People who are Tanakh only would say that's not true. Read Ezekiel 40 through 48. We're going to have another temple. We're going to crank up the barbecue again.
Mm.
All of that's coming back. And I simply believe this. You can stack the red heifers up on an ocean-going vessel and bring these perfect cows to Jerusalem and store them at Shiloh and everywhere you want to put them. And you can sacrifice them. You can do it every day. And you can mix those ashes with the ashes of the previous 10 heifers if you could find it. If you found it at the cave of the column buried in a vessel. I mean, I'm familiar with that. But if you could do that, and you sprinkled that on the Temple Mount, and you took away the current building and built a new temple, I'm going to tell you right now that if a new temple was built, that too would be destroyed. Because people
Amen.
can't look to a building. And look, there are a lot of people who love the Bible who are serious, and they hold conferences all about the temple. The temple, the temple, the temple. Well, it reminds me of the language in Jeremiah 7.
Yes.
The temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord, the temple of the Lord are these. And Jeremiah said, look, if you think you can rely on that building, it's going to be just like it was at Shiloh. And it was, and they destroyed, and the temple was destroyed just as Jeremiah had said it. And you know what? It was rebuilt again. And Jesus of Nazareth and other people purportedly said the same thing. And guess what? It was destroyed again. And I'm going to tell you right now, they build it again, it's going down again, because God is not looking for a building. I don't believe that God ever needed or needs the blood of bulls and goats. I think he desires us to do justice, and just like it says in Micah
And
chapter
Micah
6.
6:8.
Now that's my
Mhm.
soapbox. Again, I know somebody
Mm.
could say, well, what do you do with this verse? What about this verse? What about this verse? I would say those verses, I would neatly and respectfully suggest that those are from a priestly editor who
Mm.
advocated the restoration of a system that God never wanted or never originally ordained. Now, whoo, man,
If,
I'm in trouble now.
if now, if I am not mistaken, the whole thing with sacrifices and wanting a king, etc., all of that, Rob Cook would agree with you.
Yeah.
Um, and that it's, the people wanted it, so okay, you want it. Um, I don't want it. I don't want it, says Hashem, but you want it. And that's assimilation. So many people think they have to fit in. They want to be like everyone around them. And what we need to do is to stand apart, to be sanctified, to be holy, um, and not
One,
try so hard to fit in.
yeah.
The only temple I believe that Hashem wants is the temple that we are to build in ourselves for Him, for His honor.
One, and
Anyway,
then,
that's my
yeah.
soapbox.
One quick point, and then I'm bringing Mr. Tyler on the stage. Ezekiel chapter 20 is very powerful. The whole. I mean, I love Ezekiel for a lot of reasons, but Ezekiel 20:25. This is God speaking. Now, I want people to go look at this closely, study it. Moreover, I gave them statutes that were not good, and ordinances by which they could not live. Now,
Mm,
people don't have to agree with Ross, but I want everybody to let me know
mm,
what statutes that God gave that were not good, and what ordinances that God gave that they could not live by. That's what I want you to tell me, and then I'll keep going. I defiled them, says God,
mm.
through their very gifts. I want to know, what gifts did God defile people through in their offering up all their firstborn? Now, do we think that, because some people have actually said, well, that's when they were sacrificing humans. Well, did God tell them to sacrifice humans? Of course not. In order that I might horrify them, so that they might know that I am the Lord. I want to know. I want people to write me this week and let me know, what are the statutes that God gave. They can't just be statutes and ordinances. They have to be statutes and ordinances that God gave that were not good. And, because we tend to think, I think people probably breathe it through the Christian air around them, that only good comes from God. Well, he says right here, he gave them statutes and judgments not good. So I'm just curious. Hey, Betty, happy
Oh,
birthday.
thank you.
Congrats on the book.
Oh, thank you.
I'm going to roll in and let Dave Tyler take the mic so that he can get the heat off of me and get himself in trouble and get me off the hook for a minute. How about that?
Thank you. I'm not even going to mention anything about Pesach. So we'll just forget
Yep,
that.
we'll do that
Okay?
another day.
Thank-
All right. All right.
Yes, we will. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you. Brother Tyler, you are on
Hey,
stage.
Ross.
Take the
Yeah,
microphone. How are you, my friend?
sure. I'm doing well. Happy birthday to Betty. This year, since you're talking about birthdays, I was born on Purim, in 1959, and this year Purim and my birthday are my Gregorian birthday are the same. So it's I'm looking forward to that. Usually I try to spend it in Jerusalem, and
Yeah.
I might be doing that because of work I'm doing. But I wanted to say one thing. First of all, I really like this horizontal look that you did today. It's a great thing. My only comment about all the animal sacrifice is this. Uh, if you look at the Moses scroll, which I have a lot of faith in, there's no mention of sacrifices.
Uh-huh.
And if we go to the God view, Dr. Tabor gave a good talk about uh, at the United Israel annual meeting about the little gods that God created. We're His children. We're not a different species. We are made like Him. We're His children. So I go back to look at the God view, and that is even in the current Masoretic text, the so-called 10 words, there's no mention of sacrifice. And I personally believe if you can follow those 10, you're really doing well.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that people didn't sacrifice on their own. I think sheep and goat herders would have thought that is a good thing to
Sure.
do, to thank God, but then they ate the meat. And so I think that's probably part of the misunderstanding. But the issue is really at the end of the day, if you can follow the 10, the world would be a beautiful place, and there wouldn't be wars and killing of other people and all this other stuff that goes on now. So my point is, I just want to make that, in the 10, that's what I do.
Yeah.
The other issues, I think, were added and brought together, and like I say, maybe God even told them to go do certain things that they shouldn't have. But I think that the basic thing is, for us to live our lives like that. Um, the other issue is, when you look at the horizontal discussions, the that you looked at today, there certainly could be. I think someone mentioned it even in the chat today on the YouTube, is that we could we could have 5 people look at an accident, and there could be mainly the same view, but there'd be different views
Right.
of it. And so I think that we have to allow for that. This is how we remembered it. This is how they remembered it. But the basic 10, there's really only 10 in the Moses scroll. And I think that that's the way we should live and look for our lives personally. And I think this is a good way to understand. Another thing which we've discussed in the past, and I think the first one that brought my attention again was Dr. Tabor, and that is that in kind of all mythology, there's some germ of truth. Some are very much more truthful, but there's some other truth that comes out, and we can't just people thought about a lot of the Greek stories were all fake, and then we find some of the actual stories that happened. The face that could launch 1,000 ships and all that. There was actually a place where that stuff happened. We're not saying we have an exact understanding, but the archaeological evidence suggests this. I saw a great talk at Syracuse University on what this man has found in searching for the Greeks stories, and so some of it's there. Another issue is that the truth about how to live your life and what's fair is fair, to me, is also there. The issue, like a life for a life, is a legal limit. In other words, if someone took someone's life, you can't go kill 30 other people because you're upset about it. And it doesn't also, and what other people misunderstand is this, that you don't have to take another life for a life. You can use forgiveness, and You can use understanding. And so for me, those aspects of it are misunderstood by people. Just like when you go into a court of law today, you can say you were caught speeding and, well, Mr. Tyler, you never speed, so we're going to lessen the charge from, 25 miles an hour over to 10 miles an hour over. And you can bargain and talk with people. And this is the way God made us. We're supposed to have dialogue and have open-mindedness. And the last thing I'll say is that people can agree to disagree and still not and there's a lot of great things we're all learning here. And as Thomas Jefferson said, and I'm going to kind of paraphrase, I don't want to lose a friend over religion, philosophy, or one other thing.
Politics.
In politics. And that's
Yeah.
the thing, and you see it today, Ross, that so many people won't even talk because they're on different sides of political or religious
Yeah.
or whatever arguments. And I think it's really important, like when we have our annual meeting, that we can sit down afterwards and say, well, Ross, I don't think you're right, and here's why I don't think you're
Yeah.
right, and bring up good points. And I learned from all sides that there's some truth in everything that people are saying. It's not all just a bunch of lies. But I do like this.
Add one point. Yeah, one point, Dave.
Sure.
Sorry, one point. I was just going to jump in and say, I want people to understand, even if I get on a soapbox about the sacrificial cult, do I believe that sacrifices were done? Absolutely, and I think the biblical records give us accounts of those sacrifices. We see that's throughout the text. Do I think Elijah and Elisha? Let's use Eliyahu real quick.
Yeah.
Eliyahu sacrifices, and there's this big deal between he and the prophets of Baal. We're working on some of this for the Northern Prophet series. Is that a show enough sacrifice that happened in the Hebrew Bible? Yes, but notice something. Do you realize that is not at the place where God would set his name? Is it okay then? Are you telling me that Elijah, a 9th century BCE prophet, didn't know about the rules that a sacrifice had to be slaughtered in a certain place? So in other words, there's more to the story, and what I want to do is peel back the layers and understand the sources. We see in Egyptian, Assyrian, various records from the ancient world, almost without exception, all ancient peoples sacrificed. And but I just wanted to make it clear. Of course, I see the sacrificial system. The point becomes, what is the authentic, original religion, if you will? Did that find a way in there? So anyway, I know that you were making similar points. I just wanted to make sure it was clear. I was looking at some of the
Sure.
the text.
Even in the story about the Hebrews wanting to eat meat, and they said, we want to eat meat like the other nations. This was not God's original. I mean, in the Garden of Eden, there was no meat eating, and so that's an issue for me that I think. And God's always bent his way. One last thing, I'm sorry to throw this out, but I remember when Rabbi Jones gave that talk at United Israel, and he said, God has always bent for us. He's always, and in the end, he just said, look, come back and be my people, and I'll be your God. And so like I say, I'll end with the thing I started with. If you follow the 10, you're honing in on it right there, and that's a difficult thing to do. You don't think so until you start looking at it in a more higher, consciousness, and you start thinking about what did it really mean. Anyways, I just I like the format. I'm looking at it horizontally, and we do that in a lot of things. I did put up something that horizontal analysis has been done for centuries. So I don't think any one person could say, "Oh, well, I invented this."
Right.
And so I'm just going to say that as the last thing. And if hopefully y'all will be in, you'll all be or many of you will try to get to St. Francisville, and
Absolutely.
I'm looking for it.
Absolutely.
All right.
Hey,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Dave. Thanks. I'm going to
Bye.
invite Dr. Tabor on the stage, and what I'll say is he's coming up. Um, Look, I'll post the link, or Seth or someone can post the link. We did a class on sacrifice that I think fairly accurately covers at least my view on this, and I highly recommend that to kind of get a feel for what I'm saying there. Hey, Dr. Tabor, how are you?
Hey, Ross, I'm good. Thank you. Hello, everybody. You can hear me okay, I take
Yep.
it. So,
Yep.
okay. Yeah, we've taught on this a number of times rather exhaustively, and I don't want to repeat all of that. But one new thing that I learned last year, or at least observed last year, and I don't even remember if it was in time for you to include it, but that is if you go to Jeremiah 7, which is such a key chapter, and you get this refrain from the prophet Jeremiah in the temple 40 years before its destruction. He
Yep.
says, "Has this house, which is called by my name, become a den of robbers in your eyes?"
Yeah.
And that's usually taken, because it's the King James Version, a den of thieves, den of robbers. As you know, all of you I know probably realize this, 40 years before the destruction of the second temple, another person went into the Herodian temple and stopped the commerce going on, not just the money changing. People always talk about the money changing. That was part of it. But also it was animals and the whole sacrificial system. And in our earliest account, which is Mark, Matthew and Luke, I think, are derivative. It says that he wouldn't allow anyone to carry anything through the temple. So it's actually a shutdown, like a sit-down strike, you might say.
Yeah.
And that lasts until the evening. So it's pretty major. I think that's basically what got him killed. A lot of
Oh, yeah.
people talk about blasphemy and so forth, but really it's like he's going to destroy this place. The Romans are going to come and say, you guys are, too much violence going
Again,
on.
James,
So here's
also
my
to your point, also just quickly, that very thing, that's what got you say that it might be what led to Jesus' death. It certainly led to near death for Jeremiah. You challenge this
Yes,
system, you are going
it's
to
yeah, you
find
don't do
yourself in a
that
bad place.
even today.
Yeah.
So Jeremiah 7, though, let's look at that phrase "den of robbers." The word for
Mhm.
den is actually cave, very
Yep.
common word, ma'ara. But robbers is a very interesting word. It occurs dozens of times. You can look it up. I'll spell it for you. Pe resh sade. Okay, so we would call it parats. It almost sounds like what it means to me in my ear. Parats means to shred, to break, to rip apart, to break open, to break in pieces, to tear in pieces. And a cave of shredders is actually an image of wild animals that drag prey to the den. And notice it's a den, a cave, and then shred it apart.
Yeah.
So it's really a poignant image that Jeremiah uses. Now, when you go to the New Testament, and by the way, right before that, he says, "You shed innocent blood in this place." As far as I know, they're not murdering humans in the
Right.
temple
Right.
itself. That might have happened in extreme circumstances, but he seems to be talking about something you're doing all the time.
Yeah.
And so in the Greek, because Mark would be Greek, it also says a cave. It actually uses a word that some of you would know, spileon. We use that in English about caving and so forth. But the word robbers is leistes, which actually is used by Josephus regularly for bandits that carry the sword and they come up behind somebody and just slit their throat or cut them open. The zikarai.
Yeah.
And so it's not just you can rob something in silence almost. Sir, you could come in stealthily and steal things. That's not actually the word. So it's unfortunate that the King James used thieves, probably likening it to the New Testament, the thieves on the cross. Well, the thieves on the cross were caught in an insurrection, and they're not really thieves as much as they're bandits that rip
Yeah.
people apart. So probably wanted for murder. Well, that changes things somewhat in English if you realize and look up that word. For example, it's used in Isaiah 35, verse 9, for a ravenous beast.
Yeah.
Ravenous.
Yeah.
That's another term. Somebody that's ripping something apart, pouncing on it, and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Well, are they doing that in the temple? Not really. It's hyperbole because, you slay the animal with some sort of knife or cutting instrument. But it's being likened here in contrast to what's called a house of prayer for all people.
Yeah.
And that, of course, Jesus combines Isaiah 56 and Jeremiah 7. In his statement, you've made it a den of thieves. It is written, it shall be called a house of prayer. And the interesting thing about that, and you did point it out, I know, in your coverage of this whole subject, but I want to add it since it's coming up here. If you look at Isaiah 56,
Oh, yeah.
I'll just turn to it, and any of you that have a Bible, you can turn to it. It kind of negates what I'm saying the way it's written, because I just quoted, and took it as a house of prayer, not sacrifice. So in verse 7, it says, I will bring them to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. And then I believe if you take out the next phrase, you say, oh, you're going to take something out. But let me just read it without it. And make them joyful in my house of prayer, for my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people.
Yeah.
So what is that phrase? Their burnt offerings and sacrifices will be accepted. That's someone who's taking the view that if they got their attitude right, then we could have sacrifices.
Yeah.
Well, this is not Jeremiah, it's Isaiah. But Isaiah also has lots of passages that would parallel this. Early on in the early chapters, you went through that rather thoroughly. So I think that is one of those additions by the scribes that got a little bit concerned that you could read Isaiah 56 and think, oh, it's a house of prayer, really.
Yeah.
Well, what's the opposite of prayer and meditation and quietness and sensing the presence of God? Slaughtering an animal. It's huge work. Jesus refers to it in Mark 2, Matthew 12, about the priests' work on the Sabbath. But what are they doing? It's butchering. It's very hard physical work. And he's talking actually about how could they get by with it on the Sabbath. But we have a good friend, Ron Vanderham. Some of you've met him. He comes to our meetings. I hope he'll be there in April. He has owned and operated slaughterhouses. And I don't think he does now, but in the past, he's a dairyman.
Yeah.
But he had a diverse business. And he's explained to us that when you sacrifice a 2,000-pound bull or something like that, I'm not talking about a little lamb, the effort that goes into it is huge. I don't care how many people you have lined up doing it. The gallons of blood that would squirt out of the neck, 20, 30 feet, sliding around, entrails being taken out in wheelbarrows. You'd need 5 or 6 wheelbarrows just for the entrails of one animal. And then we get these texts that talk about when the temple's dedicated in First Kings or Second. I always
First
forget.
Kings 8. Yeah.
First Kings 6, I think.
8.
Yeah.
Yep.
If you read Solomon's prayer, there's no mention of sacrifice. He actually says, uh, the stranger will come from afar, look to God and pray. But then after, the text does say that they offered these huge numbers of animals. And Vanderham just makes the point that these numbers are exaggerated. He's not saying they didn't ever offer sacrifice, but
Right.
the Kidron Valley would be so. If you, let's say you slaughtered 200 or 300 bulls, the Kidron Valley would be stopped up for months with rotting flesh and entrails, and the blood would flow all the way down to the Dead Sea. I've walked actually down the Kidron Valley years ago when I was surveying caves down by Qumran. So I think that point about a cave, a lair, LAIR, like a lair
Yeah.
of animal where they shred. It's a hyperbole statement about what was going on. It was just becoming a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
The other thing, and then I'll get off so others can talk. I don't want to take everybody's time. Is that there was no kavod in the second temple. So think about that. So all this talk about the red heifer, and even the fundamentalist Muslims, the crazy ones, they actually, as you know, called October 7th the Al-Aqsa flood. We've all talked about that. And plenty of articles, you can Google this. They're putting out regular statements from Hezbollah and Hamas that those Jews want to offer the red heifer and start sacrifices again.
Yeah.
And then people who never heard of it, they go, what? Or what are you even talking about? The ashes of the red heifer and so forth. But if you think about it, let's say they had the ashes in the Second Temple period, which the Mishnah says they did. What were there? Nine different cauldrons or jars of ashes since Solomon's time, according to the rabbis. So they're cleansing the temple from defilement and impurity, but there's no, Christians call it Shekinah or Shekinah. The biblical term is really kavod. There's no cloud glory in that temple. It left in Ezekiel chapter 10. It's never come back. So that actually reinforces the idea that it's simply a building. Have you ever heard Eisenman talk about Herod's
Oh, yeah.
temple? He starts
Yeah.
sputtering about it.
Yeah.
Because Herod is the most despicable person within
He's a
a
pig.
couple hundred years since Antiochus Epiphanes. He's horrible.
Yeah.
You know how many of his kids he murdered? He drowned his own son in the swimming pool, on and on. He's a horrible person.
Mhm.
And so Eisenman gets all worked up and says, that is not a holy temple. I would never kiss that wall, and so
Yeah.
forth. But what he's talking about is the actual building. Now, the space is, of course, sacred if you accept that that's where the temple was, which I do. The space is sacred, but it was a threshing floor originally, with cows going around threshing grain. That's not, you don't normally think of that scene as a holy place for a temple. And then Shiloh, the same way, it's a portable thing. And as you mentioned in 2 Samuel 7, when it's suggested that this be built, God says, what? I love the
Yeah.
language there.
Yeah.
In all the years, did I ever say that I wanted a building?
Yeah.
I can't remember. It's like he's trying to,
Yeah. You're
we
gonna
would go,
build me
did
a
I
house?
say
How
that?
about I
Maybe your
build
wife
you a
or husband
house?
says, you
Yeah.
said this. You go,
Yeah.
I said that? I never said that. So it's sort of funny to read.
Yeah.
And he's talking to Samuel and he goes, I never, go tell David that I'm perfectly happy in my portable tent.
Well, he
And
says, I'll
so,
build David a house. You're not gonna build me a house. I'll build you a
yeah,
house.
I'll build you a
Right?
house. Why don't I build you a house and your descendants will be your house?
Yeah.
So I just wanted to add that, especially about the parats rather,
Yeah. Good points.
parats,
Excellent.
because I think it should be translated a cave of shredders, and it's a very poignant image of violence and ripping something apart. And I
Mhm.
imagine it looked like that if you you were there that day. It was not pristine. It was not a pleasant thing to think about. The odor would be horrible. The rabbis say no, there was no fly ever seen in the temple,
Yeah,
and it had no odor whatsoever when they killed the animals.
yeah,
So no comment on that other than,
yeah. I don't believe that.
just think about it.
Yeah, excellent.
Okay, thanks, Russ.
Hey, thanks for your
Yeah.
comments, James. Appreciate it. Shabbat shalom. Ross Bearden, how are you, my friend? Glad to see you made it. It is good to have you on here. Don't know if you, all you have to do is unmute your mic and let us know what your thoughts are, brother.
It should be unmuted. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly. How are you today?
Great. I am fine, thank you. It's an honor to be here amongst all of you. Let me say happy birthday to Betty.
There you go.
And um, you had said that you mentioned or missed me on Jethro. I was sorry I couldn't be here myself, but I do have some observations
Yeah,
on some of this.
yeah,
As far as the event, well, a lot of the book of Leviticus, if you will. And this is just something that I've worked out over the years of doing my own research. Is that after Moses had come down and received the Ten Commandments and the Mishkan had been built, from what I can understand and gather, is that because he had come down the second time, in my opinion, his face had shown and he had to wear a veil over his face.
hmm,
And we're told that whenever Moses went in to speak to Hashem, he would put the veil down, then come out and speak to the children of Israel what Moses had been commanded.
yeah,
And in fact, the book of Leviticus starts off this way. He called him into the tent of meeting and he spoke to him. This goes on for quite a few chapters. It's the only exceptions in my mind are somewhere around 9, 10, when we actually get an account of what's taking place at the inauguration of the temple. But most of the book of Leviticus seems to have been delivered to Moses inside the tent of meeting from the voice between the two wings of the cherubim.
mm,
This is just an observation of mine.
yeah.
So that's the only explanation I could come up with for where did a lot of this come from. I mean, I don't disagree that there were multiple hands in this at different times, but I'll leave it there.
Well, it's always good to hear your take. And by the way, just a reminder, because you appeared here with us the last time we had a conference, so keep an eye out. The dates are April 19 through 21, and if I don't see you before then, I'd love to have you come to our conference. So as we did last time, we're going to have plenty of conversations in the evenings, and so I hope you can make it. And I know in the past, one of the things that I've really benefited from, you do such a thorough job on your research that I think it was your study on Jethro that you shared some of that material with us before. Anytime you want to post some of your studies, I would greatly appreciate it. You can do it here. A lot of people, at least a lot of our group, is here on Discord. So anyway, I hope you can come, Ross. It'd be good to see you again, and if I can see you before then, that'd even be better. So you know where I live.
Well, thank you. I'll see if I can arrange to make a trip out there and give you a heads up.
All right, good deal. Thank you, Ross. Jodell
Thank you.
mentioned there are no rooms available in St. Francisville, so we do have minimal hotel stay room. In other words, there we have our one This is what other people tell me. I don't have to stay at a hotel when I'm here because I have a house here. But what I've heard is that one of the hotels, and I know is newer, the Best Western, the other hotel, the Inn on the Lake, is not as nice. I don't know if they have rooms there or not. But what I do know, and Dave just posted it, beat me to it, that they do have VRBO and Airbnb. So you can certainly find other places to stay in St. Francisville. But Jodell's point is also look in Zachary. Zachary is only about 20 minutes from St. Francisville. Traffic is always light. These are small towns. And also New Roads, Newaroads, New Roads, right across the river. We say it like this, across the river, D-A, the river, R-I-V-A, the river. No, anyway. But anyway, you can look at Zachary, you can look at even Baton Rouge, which is more like 35, 40 minutes. But if you can come, we would really hope that you could stay in one of these places. And look, usually some of you might say, well, I might be able to go. We're not charging for registration. Registration is free. For some, the hotel room is just all they might be able to afford. So if you want to room with somebody, we have people that will work out, someone else may be wanting to look for a roommate, man or woman, whatever. And then the other thing is we have people with vehicles here. So you don't necessarily have to spend the money to rent a car. Last time we arranged with people, there were several who stayed at one hotel. One of them had a car and they were able to give rides. So anyway, don't not come because you think, oh man, it's just tough. I can't afford it because there might be some help out there. So anyway, the prison rodeo is happening at that time. Yeah, as one of the weekends, the weekend that we had to use, it's tough. April is in the founding documents of United Israel. And it's always tough to find because the perfect date because people are dealing with taxes around the 15th. You usually, like we have here, you have Pesach is the Monday, begins Monday evening, the following day after the conference. So we're hoping that quite a few people can come, but we also want you to know that our goal is to either stream live and or post the videos of the conferences later. So if you don't get a chance to attend in person, don't worry, we've got you covered. All right, it's been almost an hour. Does anyone have anything they want to say, some final comments? What I'd like to do is remind everyone that if you are part of the Yakad, you can join us on Wednesday night for our On the Stage event where Jonah and I are doing our Shapira study. We're going through week by week the Shapira saga, and these are really popular shows. I mean, for us, we've got quite a few views on those. People are excited about it. Several have written and said, please continue to fight for Shapira. I think we've got quite a few people have become convinced that the Shapira saga sheds light on perhaps one of the most exciting pieces of biblical scholarship, if you will, that the world has ever seen. So hopefully you're joining us on Wednesday. But you don't have to join us Wednesday. If you're not part of the Yakad, you can join us on Thursday when those are generally streamed live to or premiered on our YouTube channel. And as always, meet us on the Discord and Horeb, and you'll find all sorts of good things. People are starting to share more here, so please do. Please join us. Go to the dialogue. Check out, leave your comments, your questions, post articles, and join the conversation. You'll also notice that you can come on here anytime and find somebody, and some are actually joining in the community chat and spending time talking. You don't have to have me and everyone else with you, just find somebody that's on and enjoy the chat. All right. Have a beautiful day. Shabbat Shalom, and we will see everyone Wednesday, Thursday, or Saturday at the latest. Have a beautiful day. Shabbat Shalom.